So recently, with what's been happening in the United States and its spillover effect across the world, there has been a lot of focus on the issues of police brutality, police power, and killings by the police. Now, to be absolutely clear, this is a very, very legitimate debate. It is a serious problem, not just in the United States, but around the world. Um, it's a major issue to do with liberty, to do with human rights, to do with democracy itself. It's a very critical issue, and I do think it's timely that it is debated and discussed. Now, here in the UK, the police absolutely are not flawless. I've been very critical of some of the things, some of the ways that police forces have responded to certain situations. For example, their overreach in imposing COVID regulations. South Yorkshire police, in particular, um, have not exactly had good PR in that regard. So I strongly support the right to criticize the police and also the right to, or the necessity rather, of the police being accountable for their actions. And finally, no police officer should be above the law. When a police officer assaults somebody for no justifiable reason, or they commit another offence, they shouldn't be put on desk duty. They should be arrested, as anyone else would be. And particularly police officers should be setting an example. Now, that's all something I wanted to say to be absolutely clear so people don't get the wrong idea. But there is another side to this, and I'm going to read out a report which I think really highlights that other side, and that is the abuse that the police receive in this country. Now, I'm talking specifically about the UK here. I don't want to kind of muddy the waters by bringing in other countries to this one. For this one, I'm thinking specifically about the United Kingdom, um, and about what police forces face. Now, policing's always been a dangerous job by its very nature. You know, if you're in a profession where you are confronting and apprehending criminals, some of them dangerous, then it's inevitably going to be a difficult job. Scenes in London over the past fortnight, my sympathies have been pretty strong with the Metropolitan Police, because they really have had it from both sides. And a number of officers have been injured. And the Metropolitan Police in particular, you know, every single year they have to deal with these sort of situations, protests, rallies, and more often than not, they do turn violent. So I think you'd need very, very thick skin to be a Metropolitan Police officer, any police officer, but particularly the Met, and particularly in bigger cities. Um, Clearly, the nature of crimes that forces deal with will vary between urban forces and rural forces. For example, there's different sorts of situations that they face. But you know, generally, it goes without saying it's a challenging job. The salary isn't outstanding, so I do think that before people vilify the police, they need to consider these things. Um, so without further ado, I'll read out the report. Discussed by this. So this is from the Evening Standard. Off-duty police officer brutally attacked by a gang of 15 youths after identifying himself as a police officer, as police. The report is by Harriet Brewis. An off-duty police officer has been left with broken bones after he revealed he was a cop to a gang of thugs in Bolton. The victim, 46, was at home at 9:30 p.m. on Saturday night. A family member told him there had been an assault close to his home. This is Wednesday morning, by the way. Um, the policeman headed out to help when he encountered a group of around 10 to 15 youths on Lower Lee Road in West Houghton. That's in the metropolitan borough of Bolton and Greater Manchester. When he told them he was an officer, they began brutally attacking him. A white BMW then arrived at the scene. A woman got out and began hitting the PT with a tennis racket. As fellow officers arrived, the offenders ran away. 46-year-old was rushed to a hospital where he was treated for injuries to his face and ribs as well as a broken arm. Two boys, both aged 16, and a 40-year-old woman were arrested on suspicion of assault. A second 40-year-old woman was arrested on suspicion of drink driving. While making one of the arrests, another police officer was attacked. A 40-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of insulting an emergency worker. All five people have since been released under investigation. Chief Inspector Stephanie Parker of Greater Manchester Police said this is a shocking incident where an officer has been viciously attacked after identifying himself as a police officer while trying to help another person. This is disgusting behaviour and will absolutely not be tolerated. Our officers are committed to protecting the public and keeping our streets safe and absolutely do not deserve to be treated in this way. We are treating this incident seriously and our investigation is still very much ongoing. We are committed to ensuring those responsible will face the justice they deserve. If anyone has any information at all that could assist officers in their inquiries, please do not hesitate to get in touch with police. Now, anyone with information is asked to contact police on 0161 856 5757, quoting incident number 3163 of the 13th of June 2020. And I'll put that loads of that information in the link to this video. If you know anything about that, please just do the right thing. Contact them. I'm sure you could do it anonymously. Just do the right thing. Think about this. This officer was on his own. Backup did arrive, but he was on his own. Imagine being assaulted by 15 people. 15 violent youths. Must have been a very traumatic experience even for a police officer, someone who, is in a dangerous job anyway, but absolutely no one should have to go through that. I believe that it is high time we had a specific offence dealing with gang attacks. As it stands, you can be apprehended for common assault and for assaulting an emergency worker, i.e., a police or a paramedic. But as far as I know, there is no specific crime dealing with these sort of gang attacks. I think there is high time it's high time there should be, because there needs to be a specific offence recognising the particularly cowardly and despicable nature of that sort of pack mentality. Because naturally, if you have 10 people attacking someone, the injuries are going to be worse than if it's an individual. That's why I think it needs to be a particularly harsh consequence for that sort of crime. Now, what angers me about this is being young offenders, some weak, useless judge will give them a tap on the wrist if they even get caught. I mean, Greater Manchester Police say they won't tolerate it, and I'm sure they'll be, really working hard to find the culprits in this case. But then they'll go to courts. It'll be through video link with the COVID restrictions, and some weak, useless judge will give them a tap on the wrist. People might say, "Oh, that's very cynical," but given the track record, given the number of times we see this happening, I'm afraid my cynicism is well founded. I'm furious with two groups of people in particular. The Sentencing Council of England and Wales that sets the guidelines for sentencing, and they set weak guidelines when it comes to young offenders, which basically means they will avoid prison sentences. And also the judicial profession, particularly thinking of judges. Now, this is not to say that every single judge in England and Wales is a soft touch. I know they're not, but too many, frankly, are. There's just too many judges. You know, they say they're in touch. The Sentencing Council of England and Wales, on their website, they have this thing about debunking myths. And they say that judges face, all sorts of crimes every day. Well, you know, they don't reflect that in their sentencing. Yes, they deal with a range of defendants. Yes, they deal with a range of crimes. But I think there is fundamentally a culture in our justice system whereby judges want to, they want to limit the number of people going to prison. So I think it is actually a culture of leniency. I believe it is fundamentally an institutionalized culture of leniency, and that this is something that's happened in the last few decades. Traditionally, it was the opposite. I mean, 60 years ago, assaulting a police officer would have been a very serious offence. Today, it's an offence, but clearly, what we're seeing is a brazen sort of gang culture. Crime's always been there. I'm not going to say, like, oh, in the good old days, there was no crime. There's always been crime. There's always been hooliganism of some level, but I think that's quite frightening when you think about it. When these people are so brazen that they would attack a police officer, if that's what they would do to a police officer, what would they do to a regular person? If a police uniform doesn't scare them, what does that say? And I say, shame on all those people who advocate leniency. You're part of the problem. These people who think that, oh, we just need to understand them, we just need to rehabilitate them. You cannot have rehabilitation after the fact. To me, rehabilitation should only come when someone has paid for their crime. And the problem right now is when it comes to young offenders, the Sentencing Council of England and Wales specifically states that they don't impose punishment for young offenders, they impose rehabilitation because we want to get them away from a life of crime. But if you are a 15 or 16-year-old and you're kicking the hell out of an officer of the law at that age, then what are they going to be doing when they're 25? They're going to be armed robbers. So I do feel that I believe the overwhelming majority of the public want tougher consequences for thuggery. I really do. This doesn't mean that the British public is sort of a flog 'em and hang 'em mentality. I don't think that many people are ultra conservative. It's just that they're sick and tired of seeing time and time and time again. You look at when these things are reported, the opinions are almost unanimous. It'll go to court and they'll be given a tap on the wrist. That is an overwhelming public perception. And this is not a perception based on um, something that isn't happening. It's not something that the public is wrong about, because there are many, many, many examples of violent offenders basically getting off the hook. The Sentencing Council of England and Wales actually states on the website that there should be aggravating factors. For example, if a defendant has been drinking, that would be an aggravating factor, not a mitigating factor. Now, you would think that a gang attack would be an aggravating factor, but because this involve young offenders, in the great wisdom of the Sentencing Council of England and Wales, oh no, we better just rehabilitate them. Let's not punish them for what they've done. It's utterly, utterly, utterly pathetic, and it makes my blood boil, to be quite honest. The Sentencing Council of England and Wales need to drag themselves into the real world. I'm not impressed by them as an organisation. I think they're very heavy on self-congratulation and very light on actually understanding public anger. Because if they understood public anger, they would not be giving guidelines that are so weak. I'm not saying that every single case they get it wrong on. So there's certain kinds of crimes that I would say are probably the right outcomes. But this sort of violent thuggery, generally speaking, the consequences for that is far, far, far too lenient. Not just in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland as well, which are different legal systems, but the Sentencing Council of Scotland is just as bad. Again, in Scotland, you see these violent, destructive crimes, and they really, really don't receive the sort of penalties that they should. The issue of prison overcrowding is not enough of a reason to say, oh, well, we'll just drop justice. Prisons are overcrowded. The answer to that is build more prisons, or at least seriously consider it. Or maybe don't jail people for not paying their TV licenses. No one should be in jail for not paying their TV license. And as it stands, that is a potentially custodial sentence. So the legal system, it's not the worst in the world, but it clearly has massive room for improvement. Ironically, the Sentencing Council of England and Wales states that one of their aims is improving public confidence in the judicial system. I would like them to look at cases like this. I don't think they really do. I mean, they, they have an answer for all the criticism, but a lot of that to me is not really listening to what people are saying. A lot of it's deflection. A lot of it is, like I say, self-congratulation that we do this, we do that. They fail to mention what they don't do. They fail to mention about the fact that they are issuing lenient guidelines, particularly for young offenders. And they fail to recognize that there are cases. I mean, the attitude of the sentencing council is kind of to blame the media. They say, oh, the perception that the public has is not entirely right. And sometimes the public are led by media perceptions. So they're basically blaming the media. But there are so many cases where there are sentences that just don't match the gravity of the crime. Now, to me, something like this, when you get a gang of 15 cards, 15 thugs to attack a single officer, and it would be bad if it was anyone, but the fact they're attacking an officer shows they're not scared. Um, to me, that's a very serious crime. Every single one of them should get a custodial sentence. Every single one of them. If they're young offenders, okay, make it a custodial sentence in a young offenders institute. But it must be a custodial sentence. And you just know they'll go to court, and some weak, useless judge will basically say, okay, do a bit of community service. Even though the officer has been seriously injured, for all we know, he could suffer PTSD. It absolutely makes my blood boil. So I do think we need a massive overhaul of the Sentencing Council of England and Wales. I don't think they're a very impressive organisation. I don't think they're particularly democratic. I mean, as it stands, the public basically have no power to hold weak judges to account. As it stands, the only way the judges can sort of be held to account is either among their peers, which isn't good enough. That isn't really democratic. It doesn't involve the wider public, the people who are affected. Um, the only way they can be held to account is for professional misconduct. So let's say, for example, a judge had an affair with a juror in a case. It would be professional misconduct. Um, that sort of situation. But there is very, very, very little recourse for the public to say, we don't think this sentence is correct. How can that how can the judge be held to account? Sometimes, very, very occasionally, there can be a review. If it's a particularly prominent case, there can be a review to check if it has been overtly lenient. But the judge themselves won't be really held to account. There have been cases where judges have actually insinuated that a rape victim was to blame because of the way she dressed. Such judges haven't been held to account. In my opinion, they should be struck off and disgraced. Time and time and time again, we see this. I'm not saying every judge is bad, okay? I'm not saying every single judge is bad. Occasionally they do get it right. There was a high profile murder case in Scotland. A little girl was killed in the island of, I think it was Iona. Now, in that case, the judge did give a proper sentence. It was a 17-year-old offender, and he got a life sentence basically. But this was a particularly evil and sadistic crime. I would say that was the right outcome. So I'm not saying every single case judges get it wrong, but I would say for the most part, I'm not impressed by judges as a profession. I think too many of them continue to be overtly lenient. Has to change. Put a link to the story. And if you know anything about this, if you live in West Houghton, please just do the right thing. Because otherwise they'll just go out and attack someone else.